Well, my name is Amanda, and I'm here with...
You are here with Tanisha.
And we are with the Tampa Hillsborough County Public Library, and today we are so excited to share with you this program because we're going to be doing some Reader's Advisory. It is part of our National Library Week programming. If you didn't know, this week is National Library Week, so there's a ton of great ways you can get involved, whether it's going to a virtual program, visiting one of your newly reopened libraries, going online and getting books through our digital books, or any digital collections, or just sharing your library story with us. We are actually going to share some information at the end how you can share your library story with us. But today, Tanisha and I are going to talk about some of the books that changed our lives when we were kids. So some of the books that we loved reading and we would love to share with future generations and share with you. So let's hop right in. Tanisha, let's go ahead and take off our cameras and talk about some of these books. Okay. So I'm going to share first, and I'm going to share about a book called Dear Mr. Henshaw. This is by the author Beverly Cleary. It's illustrated by Paul O. Zielinski. It was originally published by William Morrow and Company in 1983. And I'm going to share with you the first time I read this. So this was published a little bit before I was born and quite a bit before I was reading. But I probably first read it when I was in 3rd or 4th grade. And then it really, I enjoyed it at the time, and I always enjoyed Beverly Cleary books, and we'll talk about her in a minute, but I really enjoyed it at the time, but it wasn't maybe even my favorite Beverly Cleary book at the time. I liked The Mouse on the Motorcycle, I liked Ellen Tebbett's, I liked Ramona and Beezus, but I was more of a Beezus type of fan of the older sister. But I reread it in 2006, and when I was into adulthood, and I shared it with a group of kids I was working with for summer camp. And I kind of saw how well the book held up and how many things it can mean to so many different people. So I'll share with you a little bit about the book. This is about a boy named Lee Botts. His name is Leigh Lee, and he always points it out in the book. His last name is kind of plain, so his mom thought he needed something kind of fancy as a first name. And throughout the book, he writes, first he writes to his favorite author, who is the titular Mr. Henshaw in the title. He writes a book for class. He writes a letter to his favorite author for class to do a book report, and he ends up continuing to write to this author, and then he starts writing in a journal. Well, I thought this was really cool because when I was young, I loved reading, and I loved the idea of writing to your favorite author and the author writing back. So I thought that was cool. And then this is when I learned, this is a style of book I like. This is a long word, but it's not a hard concept. It's called an epistolary book. An epistolary just means that the book is told through letters or diary entries, or, it's told through writing of documents. And I thought that was so cool that this was a letter. The whole book is told through letters and then some diary entries, and it tells the whole story. So I thought, to me, that was really cool. And the idea of writing to your favorite author and them actually writing back to you, I thought that was like outstanding and just really entertaining. And what I really liked about this book is, so Lee lives with his mom in California, and his parents are divorced, and he writes to the author because he's in a new school and he's a little lonely. And I thought this was one of the first books too where I didn't really relate to the character because he was a boy and I was a girl, and his parents were divorced, and my parents were not divorced, or are not divorced, and he was an only child, and I had lots of brothers and sisters. But it was one of the first times I think it was really important that, empathy with the character, even though his life wasn't like mine, I really was invested in his story and his struggles. And I think the most important thing is it kind of goes to show everybody can be a little bit lonely sometimes, and everybody's kind of looking for a role model. And I thought that was a really important message. And I think it's a message that a lot of kids could benefit from reading. I know myself at the time, but also other kids. And I think sometimes even what Beverly Cleary, the author, was doing was showing us, even sometimes you're lonely, a book can be your friend. And I think she kind of, when she wrote this book, that's the idea that, a book can help you not be so lonely. So I think that's a really important message. And it's a book I loved, not only loved reading myself, like I said, it taught me that cool thing what an epistolary novel is. It probably inspired me to write my favorite author at the time, but it also showed me the importance. I love to share it too now with other kids because I think it's something that can really help a lot of kids in their life. So I do want to give a major shout out because I had picked this book quite a while ago to share as one of my favorite books to share with people, but unfortunately, Beverly Cleary just passed away at the age of 104. And I do want to point out that you can find this book and almost all of her books at hcplc.org/books. But I do want to point out they're available through the regular catalog. Many are available through our Overdrive digital service, but almost all of them are available on Hoopla, which you can find at hcplc.org/ebooks. And the cool thing about that is you can check them out all right now without any wait. So if you go to Hoopla through our ebook services, you can check out Dear Mr. Henshaw or any of the many Beverly Cleary books that we have available in the catalog. Okay, Ms. Tanisha, I am going to pass it over to you and hear about some of the books you are going to talk about.
All right, Amanda, thank you so much. So in my case, I don't have one book. I actually have a series of books. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the American Girl series. And so for people that are in my age group, like older millennials, like um, early to mid 30s, are probably very familiar with these books. I'm so excited to introduce them to younger generations. So the American Girl series featured a different girl between the ages of at the age of 9 turning 10 from different periods of American history. So you can see on the screen there, we have Felicity, who her books took place during the American Revolution. We had Addie, her books took place during the Civil War. Samantha, the Victorian era. Molly during World War II. So you have all of these different girls where their stories take place in different times in American history. So the titles are all different, the authors are different, and the illustrators are all different, but they're all under the Pleasant Company. So if you do a quick Google search to get all of their books, because there's hundreds, for the American Girl series, you can use our catalog to check them out. These books were first published in 1986, and they are still being published today. So I first read these books when I was 7. It was probably the first time that I ever engaged in binge. So now we have binge watching with Netflix and everything. I would binge read these series. So my parents would buy me. So like when I got the very first one I read was the Addie series. And I read all 6 of the books in that series within a matter of a few days because I just sat in my room and I read through every single book. I just was like so deeply enthralled in these books. I was so interested in their stories. Again, these were girls, these were 9 to 10-year-old girls. So what they were going through, even though it was a different time in American history, was still really interesting to me because there's something about like the universality of girlhood. So like no matter what time in history you lived, there's still all of the things that you go through with being a girl in America. And so that's one of the cool things I loved about the book. I loved the historical fiction aspect of it as a kid. I loved reading about like what these girls had to wear, what they ate, how they played, how they went to school, like all of that stuff. So all of the things that I was going through as a girl, it was interesting to learn about how they went through it as girls. Now, looking back at this series as an adult, the thing that I love the most about the American Girl series is how they have really taken the ideas of diversity and inclusion and included those in those series. So when the little bit of history about it, when the American Girls books first started coming out, and a lot of you may be familiar with the dolls too. So the American Girl dolls are linked to the books. But when the series first came out, they started with Kirsten, who was a Swedish immigrant that came to the United States in the early 19th century. And then there was Felicity, Samantha, and Molly. And then they were noticing, of course, girls were eating these books up. And people reached out to them and it's like, hey, we noticed there's not an African American girl. There's not a, Hispanic American girl. And the American Girl Company, responded. They came out with Addie. Her story takes place during the Civil War. And then a couple of years later, they brought in Josefina. Her story takes place in, I believe, New Mexico in the mid 19th century. So they started bringing in more diverse people. Again, you heard me mention before, they have the book, they have the dolls. So not only were they diverse in the American Girl dolls, but they also were one of the first companies that featured, you could get a doll that had a wheelchair. You could get a doll that had some type of injury. So they were really one of the first major kids companies to embrace diversity and inclusion, which is really, really important. That's something that you hear about a lot today. This was something they were doing back in the 90s when I was a girl. So something that I just thought was really awesome and amazing that people would like to read. We have most of these books in our catalog. Unfortunately, some of the American Girl series are no longer in print, so some of our copies may be a little bit old, but they have newer girls. Like, in fact, the 7 girls that are up here, I think they have a few more that came after those series. So there's a ton of girls from all different places in American history that you can learn about. You can get these in ebook form, you can get them in physical book form, but it's just an amazing set of books that is really awesome and really the ideas of girlhood all across American history.
I agree
And
with
that's what I got.
I agree. I remember these cover images take me back. I remember reading these when I was young, and I always thought I kind of agree exactly what you said. It was just interesting to see how what is, different across time and what is the same about being a girl. And I think they all are 9 turning 10 in the books because they each
Yes,
have a
yeah.
birthday in their book series. And I actually remember I started reading the original 3, Samantha, Molly, and Kirsten. And then when I was older and I was babysitting kids, I think I read the other ones to the kids. I remember reading Meet Kit and Meet Addie and some of the other ones. And I would say this is also, this is what got me interested in a young girl as history. And I went on to major in that in college. So not only they're fictional, but each book does have a little bit of actual history, actual, nonfiction section in the back. And I think that's also very fascinating. So these are,
Yes, and I also so that was probably my favorite part is really learning about how they lived. So like how were things like going to school, what was like a one-room schoolroom, like Kirsten's story is a Swedish immigrant. So what was it like for her, going to school and having, it's not like Esau classes, like she had to just sit in the classroom and figure it out. So like how being a girl was at different points in history, or and the story of Josefina, like when her story took place, it technically was not part of the United States. It was actually Mexico. It's now part of the United States because I believe her story takes place in New Mexico. But all of these girls grew up and how it all came together. And also, Amanda, a little bit of tidbit. I did go through a few pains to get the original images for the books because they have updated them, but I have to stick to the original.
okay, so the covers might not look exactly like this for you guys
Yeah.
looking in the catalog right now. But I was to say, these covers make me super happy. I remember them from my own bookshelves, having many, many of these
Yep.
series. And each of the girls has 6 books in the series. So there's like, it's like
Yes.
Meet Addie. Addie saves the day. Addie, there's a birthday one, a holiday one. Uh, so there's all an
Yes.
adventure
So
one. So
yeah, so I actually did write it down because I couldn't remember, and then I did. So they have the intro book, which is the meat book, and then the second book is Addie learns a lesson, which is a book about her school, school trials and tribulations, and then there's Kirsten's surprise, which is a holiday book. Because they do have one of the new American Girls is Jewish, so it's not necessarily Christmas, but it's a holiday book.
right.
Followed by a summer book and then a winter book. So they do take place in all different times of the year and all different times of places. That's really, really cool.
Very fun. Okay, well, we're going to go ahead and we love talking about these books. And I think something, Tanisha, you and I had in common with both of the books we picked and or like the authors in the books we picked is even though they were not written, they were written a while ago, I think what they still do is they really relate to what it's like to be a kid at any time. And I think that's the thing about these books,
Mm-hmm.
Beverly
Mm-hmm.
Cleary books. They weren't written maybe in 2020 or 2010, But there are things, and I actually like that about books that were kind of written before I was a kid. I like to see what things are a little bit different and what things are similar, but I like also that it's just those, it's everything, the feelings about, the feelings about your first day of school or your first crush or
Yep.
your this, that you can, that many, many, many people can relate to across the decades. So I think that's something that's really cool. These books really do, and there's many more. I wish we had more time to talk about this, to just capture what it's like to be a kid and those feelings, those kind of feelings and emotions we all share, and those experiences that a lot of us share. So I think that's something that's really cool, and they stand the test of time. So if
Yep.
you want to find more books for your young reader, we do want to share this resource and tip. So all the books we've shared today are available in the regular catalog, but they are also available as ebooks. So the digital copies of the books, some are digital ebooks, some are digital audiobooks. We do want to point out this resource, this tip about using our digital collections. You can set the audience level for kids in each of our digital collections. So let's today focus on Overdrive and Hoopla. So in Overdrive, if you go into the main page of Overdrive, which you can get to through hcplc.org/ebooks, it will take you right to our Overdrive homepage. If you go into the settings tab and you select content preferences, you can change the audience so it's just juvenile. Now you can switch. There's two ways you can do this actually. I've shared a screenshot if you want to have the only search tool. Like if you're setting it up for a young reader, or you are a young reader and you do not want to see any books except for books that pertain to you, you can do that, and you can set up the audience preference, and then that way it's just juvenile books. You can also check the kids collection. We have a kids collection and a teens collection, so it's almost like the digital version of walking into the room, the children's reading room, or walking into the teen room. So you can set it either way. Or you can if you go to Hoopla, there's two ways to do this. So this is a screenshot of the main page of Hoopla. And you can see I've put two green arrows there. The first is you can go in on it says kids search on. So you can see there with the first green arrow at the top right, you can switch Hoopla to just the kids collection right off the bat, kind of like setting that juvenile preference in Overdrive. Or the bottom part with the format, user rating, release date. Once you do a search in Hoopla, you can select that you want only children's titles. So a good example is Little Red Riding Hood. There are many, many, many different versions of this folktale, of this fairy tale, but some might be for teens, and some might be for adults, and some might be movies. So you can go in once you do that search, and you can select only children's titles. Okay, Tanisha, we are running out of time. So let's go ahead and look in the questions section and see if we have any questions from the audience. I know we did have one earlier. It was about ways to get kids and maybe teenagers excited about reading or interested in reading. Do you have any advice for that, Tanisha, before we sign out?
Yes, I do. And I went ahead and brought myself back on camera so we could go ahead and do our closing stuff too. So, one of the best ways to get kids and teens to read is to find out what they're interested in. So, there's this idea that kids have to read a certain type of book, like you have to read like this book or you have to read that book, like you have to read literature. And that's not necessarily the case. Like the first thing you should do is get your foot in the door with something they're interested in. So if your child is really interested in basketball, like maybe find a kid appropriate, autobiography on a famous basketball player. If your kid is into art, like maybe find a good art book that they could look at. So the main thing is to find something that interests them and then introduce that to them, because then that'll sprout off, they might read that autobiography and be like, oh, I want to learn about this, or I want to learn about that. And then that can spread a lot of different ideas. I know reluctant readers is a big thing, but the biggest way that you could help get them excited about reading is to find topics that they're interested in. Another way, besides like true interest, are about books. Like one of the reasons why I love the American Girl series is because the books were about girls that were my age. So also find books about, kids. Find books about people that are their age. It's one of the reasons why the YA genre is so popular. A teen can really relate to what that character is going through. So those are two ways that you could introduce kids to reading and get them excited about reading.
And I would say don't count out different formats. I know a lot of books have, well, a lot of graphic novels are great. And then a lot of series, like one we didn't get to, but I know we've both talked about, is The Babysitter's Club, has been turned into a graphic novel. So it's not the chapter format, but it's storytelling in a different way. And also don't count out, you don't only read with your eyes. We have several great audiobook selections in our collection, so you can also read with your ears. I actually do that frequently. I call it ear reading. When people ask me, does it count if you listen to the book? I say 100% of course it counts if you listen to the audio version of the book. So keep that in mind, that it might be there are many different formats to read and to enjoy books and to enjoy resources. So it's not just sitting down with a chapter book or that sort of thing. Well, it looks like, Tanisha, it is time for us to wrap up. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. I will let you share that information about contacting us and submitting their library stories.
Yes, so of course, as we end all of our programs, we have our contact information down there. Of course, you could call, text, email, chat, however you want to get a hold of us, you can. We also encourage you to share your library story. So we are in the middle of National Library Week. So if you are interested in sharing your wonderful library story, you go ahead and use that link to share your story. And of course, if you want to see any of the other super awesome programs that we have going on in our library system, definitely check out our other programs and events. Again, this week is National Library Week. We have a lot of stuff planned for you. And next week is Money Smart Week. So if you are interested in learning a little bit more about money, that is right on deck. So definitely check out our events calendar.
Wonderful. Well, thank you, everyone. Have a good afternoon and a wonderful National Library Week. Goodbye.
Bye now.